Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. I'm also going to be at the Business Rocks Tech, Music, and Investment Summit recording shows live in Manchester, England, April 21st and 22nd, where Steve Wozniak is headlining. More information about the summit is on the show website at buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Peter Creedon, founder and CEO of Crystal Brook Advisors. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks. I'm excited to have you on the show, and I think what you're doing is really interesting and can add a lot of value. But maybe kind of before we talk about Crystal Brook Advisors, let's get to know you a little bit better and maybe cover your background a bit, and let's talk about kind of where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Queens, which I say Queens is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, because sometimes people say, oh, you grew up in the city, which is usually thought of Manhattan. But I grew up in Queens. I've lived around New York most of my life. I went to school in a small school upstate New York, and of all the places I ever wanted to go, I didn't want to come back to New York, and that's where I wound up, and that's where I've been for pretty much my whole career around New York metro area.
Okay.
So,
no, that's really interesting. So kind of what made you kind of decide to get into the whole financial space?
I was looking around. I had actually been working in hospitals, and I was part of the executive team that was running a hospital, and we were being, they say merged, but really it was being taken over. And when you're on the lesser side of the merger or the takeover, you got to look around and find something else. And I had a choice of either staying in New York and leaving the hospital industry or not. And I decided it was time to jump. I wanted to stay around New York and in New York, and I decided I would do what I really always had liked, which was the financial side, the stocks and the investments. So I looked around, but I knew I didn't want to be just a broker or just sell insurance.
Okay.
So I was talking to a few people, and they referred me to, the financial planning side and the certified financial planner and what the planners do, and that really intrigued me, and I liked it, and that's kind of the route that I selected and followed and pursued.
Okay, interesting. So just for people that don't really know, because I would even consider myself in this space, like I have a firm that kind of manages my investments, but I don't even really know much about the entire kind of space or kind of what does that mean to people. So do you want to maybe kind of give a bit of a overview of kind of what services like somebody that's doing financial planning for you really does for you?
Sure. I'll give you kind of, because I'm a certified financial planner, a CFP, the designation really is kind of the highest for anyone who's going after a planning designation.
Okay.
And a CFP takes, really, before you start working with them, they ask you a ton of questions, have a whole lot of discussion, but what they do is they really look at, I call it 6 different areas that make you up. Where are you now? Because if you ask me, where do I want to go? Oh, I want to be rich and famous. Well, where are you now?
Sure.
Think of it as directions. You're calling me, asking me for directions. I can't tell you where to go unless I know where you are.
Sure.
So you start with your current financial situation, which is, where are you? Do you have the credit card debts? What's the income? And if you really are getting a little more elaborate, you can do some of the financial statements like your income and your balance sheets and your statements, and so those type of things. So you really get a good overview of where they are, but most people don't need a whole lot of help there, but some really do. And the biggest problem I see is the debt, the credit cards, or particularly as your audience is maybe a little younger, and they got huge student debt looming out there.
Sure.
to the point that it's so significant, it really becomes one of the first issues. And I'll just jump into one story real quickly.
Sure.
I was dealing with someone who was 40 years old, and they got their law degree, but they're 40, and they were wondering why they had no money, basically. And I said, well, do you have student debt? She says, yeah, I have some. They had over $100,000 of debt.
Wow.
So what we did is we looked at the things, the different ways, how they're paying it. There was refinance. And actually, we all were looking at some of the loan forgiveness also.
Okay.
So, think of it. If they could get some of that taken care of, but really what they wanted me to look at is they've got 3 children that they're looking at college, and they're wondering why they don't have any money. So we tore into all the current situation, and we kind of figured out the pieces of the puzzles and gave them a track to run on. But that's just one area. And a lot of people have the debt, but before you kind of venture and say, where am I going, you got to figure out where you are. The next area, which is, you look at the protection needs. Fancy term for, it's looking at the insurance. But what do you have? What's the most important thing that you have? And it's you. It's your ability to earn an income. So we need to look at those issues and make sure that they're protected. But also, if you've had a homeowner's insurance or a car insurance, if you've ever shopped it, you can probably get a lower price. And, it's just a thought that let's buy the best you can get or the best that you need at the most reasonable price. And it's just getting the foundation taken care of. So the current financial situation and the protection needs are just building a base or a foundation on really what the next step, which is talking about investments.
Sure.
Investments are really, everyone says, well, where do I start? I can't tell you how many questions I get about where do I start, or if they've been doing it for a while, is it balanced? Well, investments, and we'll go probably into that a lot more later,
Sure.
But investments is more than just picking a stock. It's more than just picking a bond. It's understanding your tolerance for risk. Where do you want to go? If you have children, you've got many different goals that you have. And a financial planner always talks about goals or something like that, because we're always looking at going towards a destination. It's the trip is the fun part, but the destination is where we want to get. We want to make sure there's enough funding for the kids to get through college without getting a huge amount of student debt on there and get an education that gets them going in life. You want to make sure that you can buy a house. You want to make sure that you have the down payment for the house, or can afford the car, or you can buy the home or the second home, or have the vacation. That's why when I build a budget, I build in all the fun stuff in it. Because let's face it, a budget kind of, who
fair.
wants to do it?
Exactly, yeah.
It's kind of like eating sawdust without a glass of water. It's not fun. But if I know I'm going to build in X number of dollars to have a vacation at the end of January, the beginning of February, sometime like that, where I'm either going to go to somewhere in the Caribbean or someplace which is warm and have my feet in the 75-degree Caribbean water while I have my hand up and a perfectly chilled 44-degree pina colada is placed in it while I'm sitting under a palm tree. That's as far as I'll go on that one. But it's kind of an incentive to, okay, I'm working towards something to have some fun.
Sure.
And the fun can be anything from, just having a long weekend with a bunch of people, going to your college football reunion or a football game. It's all it is just having enough. But when you get the investments are a means to an end to get you to a destination. Some of them are going to be for short-term goals. Some are going to be for, intermediate for, a year or two down the road. I'm saving for my vacation to, be able to go to China and walk the Great Wall of China.
Sure.
Or I'm saving it to go to Mardi Gras down in New Orleans, whatever it is. But also my long-term goal, let's get rid of the mortgage. Let's look at retirement. So these investments are different, but they are overlapping into the retirement area. And the retirement area, we'll get into it in a little more detail, but the best thing anybody has is time.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, time is so important when you talk investments. For instance, if a 25-year-old who's, let's say, going to shoot for 68 because that's full retirement age today.
Sure.
Subject to change without notice, of course. But let's say if you're 25, you save $5,000 a year, and you get an average 8% return over those 43 years. Literally, it should be worth a little over, 1.64, $1.65 million. You want to be a millionaire, you're 25, it's the easiest way to do it.
Sure.
But also, how do you put away $5,000 if you're in a startup or you're young or, you're doing it when you're 40?
Sure.
To get that same number at 40, you would have to do, just to save $1 million, if you're 40 and you haven't started with anything, you'd have to put in, I think, where is this number? Actually, 45, somewhere about $16,000 a year.
Wow. That's a lot, right?
it can be overwhelming. But,
sure.
But think of it. If I work for an employer and they match 3%, so let's say my employer matches, I put in $2,500, they match $2,500, there's your $5,000.
Sure.
So, but that $2,500 that you put in is pre-tax.
Right.
And it really is only costing you $750 less than that, because that's what you see less in your paycheck, and you divide that by 26, and it's X number of dollars per paycheck, and it becomes much more manageable.
Sure.
So I always say, and if my staff usually kids me because my sense of humor is just a tad on the dry side. There's two sharks sitting by a whale in the ocean, and they say, well, how do we eat? And the older shark says, one bite at a time. How do you get to be a millionaire? One
Sure.
bite at a time.
Sure.
So it get going and just kind of move along, but there's so many potholes and things that can distract you. But when you look at the last couple areas of financial planning, it's the investments, it's the retirement, it's taking into consideration that's taxes. Taxes, it's not how much you make, it's how much you take home. That's important.
Sure.
You got to pay your fair share, but you don't want to pay too much, and you don't want to pay too little. You need to pay you need to pay what is due. But also the last area is the preservation of wealth. Some people call it estate planning, but the real thing is, once you get it, how do you keep it, and how do you keep it moving forward? But going back to the retirement, most people, how do I talk to a person that's in their 20s or 30s about retirement? It's not retirement. It's financial independence.
Sure.
Think of it today. You've got a few children, you got the house, you got the mortgage, you're working at a job, and the bottom line is if I'm in my 30s, I can't imagine 38 years down the line.
Totally. It's weird.
So
I'm 32, so I'm like, you're talking exactly to me right now.
Yeah. So in 36 years, you will be officially allowed to retire if you wanted the full Social Security age.
Sure.
That's a scary number. That's longer than you've been alive.
Yep.
So when I talk to people, particularly younger people, and I really, I do focus a lot of my practice on young entrepreneurs, small business people, it's all about financial independence.
Sure.
Because I love what I do. I don't plan on giving it up unless I can't contribute something positive to someone,
Sure.
or I just get too fed up with it. How would you feel today if you had enough money where you could say, you and your family, that's it. I'm getting out. I can live on what I've got. How would that change your thought pattern today about going to work?
Sure.
You're going to work because you want to, not because you have to. And you can afford to do what you want. And that, to me, is financial independence.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, like, it reminds me of a piece of advice, and it's kind of semi-related to what you're talking about, and it's stuck with me for, like, the last decade. And it was a lady that I used to have, like, kind of helping me do some kind of financial planning stuff. She always used to say to me, and I had some, like, kind of student debt at the time and whatnot, and she said to me, like, okay, so, and I love my tech gadgets. And she said to me, she's like, okay, so you will spend, like, hours trying to get the best deal on whatever you're looking to buy online, and you will get it shipped to you, and maybe you'll even, like, sometimes you'll maybe get it, like, wait a couple more days if you can ship it through something else to get it a little bit cheaper. But then you'll put that on your credit card, or you'll put that on a line of credit or some sort of credit, and you'll pay interest on that. And so your good deal isn't really that good of a deal, because it actually probably is more money than you would have just, even if you bought it at regular price from the highest bidder, right? Or online or something. And that kind of always resonated with me, right? And so it's kind of related to what you're kind of talking about, but it was just one of those things that I was like, oh yeah, it got me really kind of thinking about that whole space of, like, well, how much do I need something? What's it really kind of costing me? Even if I get a really good deal, if I'm putting it on, a credit card or something and paying it off over months, well, that's just kind of, I'm not really saving money. It's actually costing me more money than the actual thing's probably even worth.
And that gets into the area of what I like to call good debt and bad debt.
Sure.
Bad debt is, you run up the credit cards and you can't even use the interest rate for a tax deduction, but it's amazing what some of these credit cards are charging. I just met with someone, and she's in her first year of kind of a startup, and she's starting to make money. She's making good money now.
Okay.
And I said, what she really needed help was just kind of getting things lined up and really kind of so she can get a handle on all the current stuff. And I said, okay, let's look at the credit card debt, because she had, $30,000 worth of student loans. She had some credit card debt. And I looked at the credit card debt, and one credit card had her at 29.99%.
Wow.
I mean, wait a minute. On $6,000, you're paying $1,800 or $150 a month before touching any principal.
Wow.
And she was paying the minimum, so she was hardly denting. She kept saying, I just don't seem to see this go down.
Sure.
And I said, that's because you're paying almost all of it is interest. So all we did is I had her call the company.
Okay.
And they said, well, we'll do you a favor and we'll bring it down to 20.
Okay.
Wait a minute, 20%? Oh, big deal. Now
Sure.
It's only costing me $100. We went out, got her a different card and at a local bank, believe it or not, and she's got 18 months at 0%.
Wow.
So the $150 a month went on top of what she was paying, and that whole balance is going to be gone in a year.
Sure.
Instead of probably 10 years, she'd still have that hanging on. So a lot of what I do is we don't need to radically change anything. It's just fine-tuning it.
Sure. And that's kind of what, like, really resonated with me when you and I kind of spoke a while ago, and kind of why I wanted you to have on the show. It's just, I'm kind of sick of the people that basically say, like, you need to rechange your entire life just to, like, do what you want later on in life. And, like, I don't know if I'm just lazy or I don't care that much or really understand, or what my kind of issue with that whole thing is it's just like, if it's going well and it's kind of manageable, I don't really want to drastically change things. And maybe I'm scared of change or whatnot. And but just like kind of what resonated with me a lot was just kind of like, here's a problem I have, and you came up with like basically a simple solution that's not radically life-changing. It's like, here, you have this card, let's go find you something different. And I think a lot of people and smart people don't even think about these things, right? They're busy, especially if you're doing like a startup or you're running your own business. Even just trying to track down a cheaper credit card is time consuming and time you don't want to spend.
Well, it's also, we tend not to address a lot of issues because we're all busy.
Sure,
I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
we run out. It's like the financial world. I run out of money long before I run out of ideas.
Sure.
But I run out of time usually before things. And most people will look at the interest charges only when they get the bill, and then they
Sure.
say, I got to do something about it, but it kind of fades into the background. Or they may have had a couple blips. But what I'm doing with that person is we're going to pay this off, and our objective is to raise her credit score. So in the future, if she needs money, because eventually she's going to want to buy someplace or do something else or get a car loan, it's amazing how if you build your credit history the right way by paying your bills on time and being responsible with your money, people will come out of the woodwork trying to give you money. And they're the ones that usually and rarely use it that way. So I think the big thing is that everybody, what I try to do is we're human. We want to, do things in a way that's comfortable on us. But if we look at the overall, who you are and get that total picture, into a perspective that is understandable. Let's say when I look at a person, I see 6 different pieces of a picture, and each part of that picture is going to be, you change one, something happens in the other.
Sure.
And maybe that's a little simple, but, getting into the investment area, everybody should be contributing. Even when your kids are going to college, you should put something somehow into a retirement account.
Sure.
It's all about balance.
Sure.
It's all about, it doesn't matter whether you have a balanced portfolio, but it's risk, return, but investments are only one part of who you are, and they're only a means to an end, not the end.
Sure.
So gauge what you want by your risk tolerance and all those other big things like suitability and all those fancy terms, which means, understand what you want, how you want it, and what you can tolerate to get it.
Sure. No, it makes a lot of sense. So what? No, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so what kind of made you start Crystal Brook Advisors? Is it like, yeah, let's cover that.
Okay, fair question. What made me start Crystal Brook Advisors? I've worked for the big companies. I've been out on my own, and I've worked for different types of financial organizations.
Sure.
And I found that one thing in common is, particularly when you're in the big organizations, is they know down to the dollar how much each client should generate for them.
Okay.
And I had a real problem with, I had a boss who said, for every person who sits in front of you, you got to sell them something.
Interesting.
I hate selling people something.
Okay.
I'd rather fit that piece into the puzzle. That's why I don't do commission business.
Okay.
People work with me on a flat fee, at least on the investments. I can't say I'm a fee-only advisor because I do provide the insurance for people also if they want.
Right.
But what it is that I work on a flat fee. So I don't have a product line I have to sell. I don't have quotas that I have to sell.
Interesting.
What I do is, hey, if you like an index fund, well, let's figure out what it is. Because let's face it, when you take the money off the table and I'm not driving a commission business, what's the real focus? It's you. It's where do you want to go? So, hey, I I don't care whether you want the ETF, the exchange traded fund, or a mutual fund, but you're buying it without a commission.
Okay,
And I don't
interesting.
get paid trails or any of that. The only place I get money or my fee for my expenses is from my client. So I disclose that all up front. Get it out of the way. It's funny. I hate talking about money, about what I get paid. I don't want to. I'm shy. I'm bashful. I don't know. But bottom line is, if you get the money off the table quickly and you get the agreement, now what are you focusing on? Okay, let's focus on the debt. Let's focus on the financial independence. Let's talk protection.
Sure.
And I think that's a big part of why people don't do. I see a ton of people coming and asking questions, and they expect me to push a product, and they're surprised when I'll tell them all these different things, or I talk to them about an ETF. My old boss, when I used to work in the big company, used to have a conniption fit every time I sold them an ETF.
What's an ETF, just so for people that don't know?
Oh, an ETF is an exchange traded fund.
Okay.
It's a, let's say Vanguard, S&P 500.
Okay.
Or the S&P 500 is a benchmark, but the S&P 500 offered by Vanguard is actually a mutual fund, but that acts kind of like a stock. Well, I should correct that. An ETF is very similar to a mutual fund, but what it does is that it is an exchange traded fund. So what they do is most of them will buy a basket of stocks, let's say to act like a benchmark. A benchmark is something like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100 or a mid-cap, something that is everybody measures a performance to.
Okay.
And my thought is, hey, if you want the benchmark, buy the benchmark.
Sure.
Why? And and you get into the active versus the passive. Most of the ETFs, exchange traded funds, are passively managed. Well, okay. Passively managed means they're not buying and selling on a regular basis. It's professionally managed. The fees are usually very low. And what happens is that once a year or so, they will go in and they'll trade out the winners, the losers, and rebalance the portfolio to whatever the benchmark is, whatever they're trying to achieve. So what happens in an exchange-traded fund, then it is different than a mutual fund in that an exchange-traded fund, you can sell during the day.
Oh, okay.
So if I have a mutual fund, I won't use names, but if I have a mutual fund normally trades at the end of the day. So whatever the closing price, if I wanted to buy a mutual fund now, I'd enter my order in, but I don't get the price until the close of the market and the fund's positions are brought up to date at the close of today's prices.
Oh, okay.
So I buy in tonight after the close at the end of the days, and that's when I sell also. If I wanted to sell today, I can't sell during the day. I have to sell at whatever the price is that settles tonight.
Okay, I didn't know that, but that's interesting.
Versus an exchange-traded funds, most of those, if I want to sell them now, I can go out, I put in my order, and they sell.
Right.
So it acts like a stock or a bond, depending on which index it is,
Sure.
or an ETF. But there's differences, and that's one of the major ones that can be there. But to me, using benchmarks, gee, that's good. If you want to have a little fun money and go after a few things, sure, go for it. I don't have a problem with it. As long as it's reasonable and everyone's got to have some fun money and little things that I got someone that worked in the pharmaceutical industry, loves pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
Companies and biotechs. the people that, are familiar with an area, they use some of their mad money or discretionary money to kind of play around in that area or buy or sell shares or mutual funds or whatever else they want, because they want to have some fun with it. They life is not meant to be dull and boring.
Sure.
That's why people like me. I'm dull and boring. Yeah. With a dry sense of humor.
So I'm kind of curious then, like, how would I get kind of started with you guys? Like, what's kind of your like process? Like, I email you or I call you up, you meet with me, and then we kind of, like you mentioned earlier, you kind of figure out where I'm at now, and then kind of advise me or talk about kind of what I'm looking to do or where I want to be. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, it starts with a simple conversation. And I deal with people, and they're not always close by, or they may be in another part of the country.
Sure.
And I communicate. How do you want me to talk to you on the phone? You want to do Google Hangouts? You want to Skype? That's fine with me.
Okay.
Actually, I like seeing people, because when I kind of get rolling and I get a little passionate about what I'm talking about, but it's easy for me to kind of fall into using a lot of financial or what I think are easily understood terminology, and they may not be familiar with it. So I like the feedback and being able to see people, because you can see them kind of going, what is this guy talking about?
Sure.
So sometimes a face-to-face conversation is fine. Sometimes a conversation on the phone. So it all starts with a conversation. And they're interviewing me, but also I want to interview them. So it's a two-way conversation to make sure that it's a good fit for not only myself and my team, but also they're a good fit for me, and I'm a good fit for them.
Sure.
And that I can actually help them, but not only help them, but they'll listen to advice. I don't want someone who's going to be, I know it all. Well, if you know it all, why are you calling me?
Fair enough.
I have people that say, I know what I want, but I don't have the time to do it. That's fine. Then I'll just, hey, this is what I think, this is what I see, this is what we talked about. Would you want me to take care of this now?
Sure.
As long as we understand. And when you're working with a registered investment advisor, an RIA, and a CFP, we like initials in this industry.
I can see that.
But what you're doing is you're working with someone who's working in a much higher level. So
Right.
We're keeping track of the balance, we're keeping track of a lot of things, and you're talking to people on a much higher level. But that higher level doesn't mean, well, you got to be rich to deal with them. You got to be. To me, I don't have a minimum that you need to invest.
Okay.
You just have to have a desire to get where you want to go, and I'll help you.
Okay. So when somebody comes to you, do you basically, like, is there basically like, okay, I come to you and I say, I need to, or I want to invest in some things, like, and I don't really know what that even means or what that even really is. Is there basically some things that you'd kind of recommend to people you should be doing, like X, Y, and Z, for example?
Well, yes. Actually, in the initial conversation, it's usually a couple conversations. What I look at is, the first thing I try to find out is, in the conversation, what is their experiences? What's their tolerance to risk? Yes,
Sure.
I'll give them a risk questionnaire that'll, oh, if the market did this, what would you do? And those type of things. But you really find out, like the times that we're experiencing now in the month of January and February so far, with the market in a real state of fluctuation, that's when you really find out what people's tolerance to risk is.
Sure.
Because everyone is happy, oh, I'll go for the gold, I want to take as much risk. I see everyone making money, I want to make money. But what happens on that day where the market turns around and goes crazy?
Totally.
What would happen if you were betting oil was going back up to 140 and now it's at 20, or actually today it's spiked up, but if it was down around 30?
Sure.
tolerance to risk is very critically important, as well as your time horizon, your tax bracket, and a lot of other factors. But one other question that I've really put into my conversation is, and tell me, what are your values and what are your beliefs?
Okay, interesting.
What are your ethics? And this is really becoming more pronounced by other people. And the reason I ask that is that everyone thinks it's so difficult to have a portfolio or investment that reflect what you think. And I ask, why not?
Okay.
There's an exchange. If you believe that climate change is a problem and you would like to do something about it, believe it or not, there is an exchange-traded fund or an ETF that you can buy that has no fossil fuel in it.
Really? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
It's relatively new, but if originally the socially conscious is kind of the term it started out as, was by one or two mutual funds, and one fund started it, and it was against the sin type of things. It didn't have the tobacco, and
right.
Then it evolved into, well, wouldn't have any defense contractors for people that didn't believe in the war machine.
Interesting.
Or war. But the tobacco was the early thing.
Right.
Now you can really get a good balanced portfolio in almost all areas, and they've found in the socially conscious or in that type of thinking, it's available. It's much harder work for guys like myself to find it.
Sure.
But I ask this is that if you're talking that way, that you believe in climate change, or you have certain religious beliefs, or you believe in, solar and not the pollution or whatever, or the biggest thing is people who eat organic and don't want the GMOs in their food.
Interesting.
So you can do that. It just is, it's not hard, but you can create a portfolio that is customized without great difficulty and easy to understand for yourself.
Interesting.
And the thing is that it's not that hard, but can be done and it can be understandable. So the biggest thing I want you to do is take control of your finances, that you understand them. Again, if you have the information, then you're addressing the fear which most people have, which is an unknown. Oh, I don't want to do that. Well, why not? Well, I don't understand it is usually the question.
Sure.
Or it can do this. Yes, it can, but it can also do that. So understanding what you have and how that piece fits into the overall asset allocation, which is a big overused term, which means, okay, we know your risk tolerance is this, which means 40% is going to be in large, reputable companies. Okay, this piece fits into this piece of the puzzle here. So everything that we're doing, you understand, but you understand why. You don't have to know a bond duration is calculated this way. That's for nerds like myself that really kind of live and die on that stuff. But, it's take control with understanding and what you want to do. But put what you believe, and if you're going to talk it, walk it.
Sure.
So you have, there's so many different socially conscious, if I can use that term, and now it's socially conscious, governmental philosophy, and that's for every age. You can buy that with a minimum of $50 a month, or maybe some of them have a minimum of $100 or $200.
Right.
And that can be readily available.
Sure. So they're it's pretty affordable, right, to get into this stuff and then pick something that you're passionate about, and maybe you'd follow investments better. I know I would if I was doing that kind of stuff, and I probably should be. It's interesting.
But it's not hard, but most people don't know it, and most people don't talk about it because people who are just on a commission basis, they're just trying to make a sale.
Right.
Now, that's not condemning the people that are on that side. They're very good people on that side. But, if you've ever worked with a broker, when I talk to a guy, that was selling me a stock, my average conversation was maybe a minute,
Sure.
30 seconds to a minute.
Sure.
Hey, I found this great thing. You want to buy it? It looks good. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, if you're not in a transaction business, it's a lot easier. But also, it's easier if you understand, hey, we're buying Microsoft or Facebook to fill this part of your puzzle. We're expecting this, and we're going to give it a chance to perform.
Sure.
But to me, if you're buying, a lot of people say, well, I'm afraid of, well, let's address the fear. What I do is when I buy something, I get a buy-in strategy,
Okay.
but I also figure out where the exit strategy is. If you have bought, I don't know, you bought an investment today and it went up 25% tomorrow.
Okay.
You want to leave it on the table and see whether it goes up, or would you just sell it and take your profit and move on? And if it moves back down, then you buy more of it.
Okay.
But
Interesting.
the thing is that you understand, if you're dealing with the person who's helping strategize, what's the strategy? So if your strategy is, well, let's say if it goes up 20 or 25%, we'll talk about selling it and sell it. But where do we sell it if it goes down?
Right.
Everyone's
Okay.
good at going. Everyone's good when they're making money.
Sure.
Nobody complains, oh, I made 18% and I wanted 19. They're happy.
Exactly.
But the thing is that the problem comes on, and particularly with a lot of people, they don't want to let go. If they're on a piece of paper, they're losing money.
Right.
I bought Apple at 110 and it's at 94. Oh, I can't do that. Well, if you had set up your original strategy that said, well, if Apple goes up 25%, I'll look at it again. It's one of my core holdings or whatever it is.
Sure.
And by no means am I recommending any stock because I can't do that.
Sure.
But now if you said, if it went down 10%, I would have sold it, which means would you or would you have not?
I got you.
So
Yeah.
you have your strategy and you say, part of what I do is to hold you to your strategy.
Okay. Interesting.
Is it worth keeping, or do we want to add to the position when it's this low?
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I see.
But I also have people that do, ask me. I had one guy who was actually a good friend of mine and a neighbor. He called me and said, hey, find out about this for me. And I said, and I looked at it and I said, I can't really get my head around it. I don't know what this guy is doing. I wouldn't feel comfortable suggesting it.
Okay.
About a year later, he calls me back. And by the way, remember that I asked you about that question? I said, no. Being honest with you, no. It may have slipped my mind, but the thought was that he said, I got to say thank you. I said, for what? He said, you told me not to do something. I said, okay. And he said, that person turned out to be a bit of a fraud.
Okay. Interesting.
So some people just want me to kind of help them do the due diligence. Let's face it, everyone makes mistakes and everyone likes claiming and, oh, look at this. How many people talk about their mistakes?
Sure.
I'm human. I make my share of mistakes. But if you're looking at a long-term or a time horizon and you do your due diligence, you have a better chance of starting out. And, this is one thing that I do in talking to people is I want to hear what they have to say. I want to listen to what they're talking about to be able to figure out all those risks in their time and their dreams, because if you can think it and you put it in writing, you stand a much better chance. I have a very simple saying that started out as kind of a joke, but it really took off, was that if you have a plan and you don't put it in writing, you have a wish.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
You need to have it in writing where not reflect on it every day, but I have, look at it once a year. That's why I have semi-annual or annual reviews. That's why people have the free access. I give them my cell phone number, and I say, if you got a question, call. Because it's not just what you got, it's giving you the motivation to keep going, to get started, and take action. All these plans are worthless unless you take action.
Totally.
You got to take action, but the key to it is you got to monitor it. You got to keep an eye on it to make sure it's on track. If you thought 10 years ago you would be sitting in that chair talking to some guy, a registered investment advisor in New York, could you ever think of it? I mean,
sure. No, totally. You're totally right. Like, yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Another favorite saying I got: life happens.
Yep.
I mean, I've got one guy who was in Massachusetts, and he's moving to New York. But all of a sudden, he may get an offer for out in California, so he's not sure where or how or what he's going to do.
Sure.
And that's the fun part of life is you're along and you got to enjoy the ride because you don't get to be 25 or 30 or more than once. It
Yep.
goes fast. So, and I think that one key thing that if I have to tell someone in your audience, every person, let's say an entrepreneur or a business person, needs four advisors.
Okay.
And those four advisors are: you need a good accountant, you need a CPA to keep you going because you got to do the taxes, you got to do your filings.
Right.
And they become a very critical component of your life, particularly as if you're in America, April 15th sticks out in my head for some reason. I can't remember why. Oh, yeah, it's tax day. But, you got to have a system. You got to be somewhat organized. But the second advisor you need is some type of attorney.
Okay.
It's not just for the little, I got a parking ticket or a speeding ticket or the bumps and lumps of life. There's different types of attorneys for different types of businesses. And one attorney I like very much is in the intellectual property.
Okay.
Because you have intellectual property, believe it or not. You have trademark. You have sayings, but you have your name, and you want to protect your business. You don't want to all of a sudden come up with a business that you find, and I had one client that did that. He had a name of a business, and it was on the other side of the country. They hadn't used it, so he started using it. And all of a sudden, he was in business for almost 8 years, and he gets a letter in the mail. Cease and desist using our name. And there were two unrelated businesses, but basically it went to court, and he lost. So his business of eight years that he had built from scratch wound up having to change its name because someone else had trademarked it.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's good advice.
Yeah, but you got a trademark, you got a patent, so there's different types of laws. And, there's a lot of good lawyer jokes, but we won't go there. But the third type of advisor is kind of, if you're in a business and an entrepreneur, is you need your property and casualty guy. You got to get your, I'm talking to a business now, and they deal with some food.
Okay.
And so there's just think of all the things you've seen in the newspaper about meats or coming off the produce in California, and it turns out it was next to a farm. I mean, I don't want to be that guy that has to worry about that at 2 o'clock in the morning because my product has to be recalled and the FDA is knocking on the door.
Totally.
So you need that protection, whether it's the home or the car or the liability or the errors and omission. Those people are, and the fourth person that you need is a good CFP, certified financial planner, because they're looking at the overall situation that you have. And
Sure.
what they're doing is they're kind of making sure everyone talks to each other, that the information is shared. Sometimes the accountants only look from the accounting and saving you money now. Well, sometimes you may want to pay now and not have issues down the line or make more. Particularly comes in handy when you start talking an estate plan.
Sure.
Gee, you could give away $5 million to a trust, and the federal government allows you to do it, the U.S. federal government.
Right.
So, the accountants sometimes look at their field, and they look at their field from a tax perspective, and that's what they do really well. But sometimes you got to spend a little to make a little more,
Sure.
which is a critical part of the business. But a CFP is the guy who puts those 6 pieces of your picture and tries to keep them in balance, but also keeps a team of advisors around you, kind of, keeping you on track and keeping you going. Because if those areas are handled, you're allowed to focus on what you do best, which is your business and your ideas, and move forward.
Sure.
If I want to be worried about getting all my receipts and putting this and getting my deadlines and spending 20 hours on taxes, can I do it? Yes. Do I want to do it? I'd rather pay my accountant, who is better at doing that, my CPA, who is paid to keep up with the nuances of the law and save me money.
Sure.
I don't want to deal with that IRS letter
Sure.
or the New York State letter or some other state's letter to me.
Sure. Makes total sense.
I learned in my business, because really this is my third business that I've kind of started from scratch, is that I've learned that I know what my strengths are.
Right.
I know what my weaknesses are.
Which is hugely important.
It really is. And I know what time I've got.
Sure.
And if I want to be worrying about pencils, or do I want to worry about whether my client's return on investment, or preparing for a meeting so I don't sound dumber than I really am, which tends to be real easy, but I'd rather be doing what I do best, which is meeting with people and guiding them and assisting them. I'm
Sure.
here to help you get where you want to go. The spotlight isn't on me. The spotlight is on you to get you to the kids through college, to get the mortgage paid off, to live in a warm climate, or someplace, whatever your dreams are. If you can dream it, you put it in writing, you got a target that you can hit. You don't have a wish.
Sure.
But the wishes should be put into it.
Peter, I love it. Sadly, we're out of time. I think that's a great way to end the show, but I think let's maybe just cover where people can find you guys online and any other kind of social media links you want to promote. And I'll post these in the show notes as well.
Well, you can reach me at, if you have a question, you can always reach me at my email address, which is Peter@Crystalbrook Advisors, CrystalBrookAdvisors.com. I have a blog at my website is crystalbrookadvisors.com, and that's Crystalbrook, ADVISORS.com. Or you can follow me or send me notes on Twitter at Crystal B Advisor, ADVISOR. And that's the easiest thing. And yeah, I do write for some things, and I have a very simple philosophy. Everybody deserves to have a simple, understandable, not simple answer, but an answer to a question. And I'm here to help you get where you want to go and help you define it if you need to define it, and give you alternatives to get, that you can select based on knowledge and understanding.
Peter, thanks again for doing this. I love it. I'm glad that you took the time out of your busy day to kind of chat with me and be on the show. And I'm excited to kind of keep in touch with you and kind of see where things go in 2016.
I think it's going to be a very interesting year. But, I'm looking forward to it. Believe it or not, we're entering February, so we're down with the longest, darkest month of the year, I think. I think it's going to be an exciting year. I think it's going to be filled with volatility, but I look forward to answering any questions, helping people, and if you've got a few questions, feel free to ask me, and we'll let you go on that note, I suppose.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, Peter. I'm like I said, glad you did this, and excited to have this thing go live, and we'll keep in touch. Sounds great, man. All right, you have a good one. We'll talk soon. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the show. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com. Until next time, keep building the future.